still in the process, and I think he's going to try to show some success in those. And so a lot of it is comes back to he's definitely more of a policy block than I think people think. Who has and Venezuela, right? The Trump administration has been striking these alleged drug codes in the Caribbean and in the Eastern Pacific Seas. The ideas of the state are still in the process.
Calling up the Wall Street Journal to say, here's what's going on with my health. He's pretty transparent, answering all of these questions. And so,
that happened in the Capitol, or in this case, does not happen. Yeah.
So it's almost glad to have still in the process, and I think he's going to try to show some success in those. And so a lot of it is comes back to definitely more of a policy block than I think people think, and I think that's what he's trying to portray. We saw a long interview with the client, and so that will be fun to come in.
Chris, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for joining me here on The Source. I'll be back in 2 hours. My regular gig, anchoring the story is here every weekend at 12 a.m. Eastern, 9 o'clock to 11 p.m. here on the West Coast. In the meantime, CNN Newsnight with Absolute Charts right now.
Tonight, Tale of the Tapes. What Jack Smith told Congress in his deposition about January 6th. President Trump.
Our view of the evidence was that he caused it and that he exploded it and that it was foreseeable.
As key defendants ran a march on the Capitol to mark 5 years since the insurrection. Plus, locked and loaded and ready to go, Trump draws a red line for Iran, and protesters are attacked, and MAGA goes down.
Isn't that strengthening Samantha Powers and Hillary Clinton?
And Mamdani takes over the New York City mayor's office and ends some policies seen as pro-Israel. And this promise in his inauguration speech:
we will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism.
Has the right in a collective fury. Live at the table for a special 2-hour news night. Brad Todd, Charles Blow, Miles Taylor, Lydia Moynihan, and Ellie Honig. Americans with different perspectives aren't talking to each other, but here they do.
Good evening, I'm Abby Phillips in New York. Let's get right to what America's talking about. Jack Smith, the man at the center of the judicial investigation into President Trump, now in his own words. For the first time, stating his decision to charge President Trump with his role in the attack on the Capitol on January 6th.
The evidence here made clear that President Trump was, by a large measure, the most culpable and most responsible person in this conspiracy. These crimes were committed for his benefit. The attack that happened at the Capitol, part of this case, does not happen without him.
So the fact that led House to the very confusing to release a long-awaited interview on New Year's Eve while most of the country was off for a holiday. It's also worth noting that Smith tried to testify publicly, and the testimony released this week is a sense why Republicans may have rebuffed that offer. On the hand, we're hearing and seeing, frankly, that in a way that we haven't since he was appointed as special counsel. I mean, it's pretty sobering how he lays out a clear case in his view that Trump was responsible, that he was warned by people, his own allies. Does this help us understand better why the charges that were brought were necessary?
I think about football every year that you see all who have 2026 to honor being the first medal of the year. To your question, I think now that the dust is settled a bit on Jack Smith, my conclusion is that he has been unfairly vilified by the right, but also unjustly deified The man is neither perfect nor a sinner. I think he's somewhere in the middle. I think this to hear him lay out his thoughts like in a very standard prosecutorial manner. I think the criticisms of Jack Smith are fair to them. But Jack Smith loves to left himself and declare that I have no political motive, I never thought about doing anything wrong. That is not his fault. Every move he makes was to rush that trial in ways that wouldn't violate Donald Trump's unconstitutional rights to get it done before the election. Now, there's an argument which reminds him that that was the right move and the necessary move, but you can only make that argument if you can see that he was thinking about the election and trying to accelerate before the election. On the other hand, the man did nothing even remotely criminal. I think Donald Trump's calls to prosecute, investigate, prison judgment are outrageous and unnecessary and destructive. So it'll be a complicated, I think, telling of history for Jack Smith, and I think he's neither considered nor changed in the final analysis.
Well, there's a difference between what you say is one thing to say, I'm really
So this is one I made yesterday, Hand of Man, orange hand-dipped tubing with a milky blue base. I'm about to just polish the tip on that one.
I do believe, however, the Democrats did make a mistake that the country, which is that they didn't do this quickly enough. They did, Marathon took a year and a half to even appoint him, and then he was now rushing in 7 months to see if he had an indictment or not. I did think it was very illuminating that in the transcript that he and his people in his office sat around and debated all the time. Should we? There were people who said, no, you don't have enough yet, and we were going to work until they found they had enough evidence that he believed that they should go ahead with the prosecution. But by that time, we were in a political game, because now you're up against, first of all, they have legal avenues that they really do have an option to exercise, and the president did. But also you're up against the election. And so now it is a critical issue about whether or not you can see with this, because we're in uncharted territory, not something you ever have to do.
It's real quick, because I agree with you, he was thinking about the election, and then they put reason for it, and the first sentence of the chapter of my book about Jack Smith reads, Jack Smith never had a chance, precisely for that reason.
I just want to make one note, because he said, I won't play because I don't want to take up your time, but he said he wasn't trying to hamper Trump's chances in the election, which I think, to Charles's point, is a different thing from the issue of timing, because he obviously knew, because this is what happened, that if Trump were a candidate, he were to win, this
Next one I'm going to bend the neck on. This is the Puffco Peak Pro. I'm a glass blower. I work with Boro. I work with Boro, COE 33. So we have clear glass. This is experimental moist raspberry over icy white satin. And this is a transparent red. I hand blasted, hand sandblasted a little bit, but I'm going to bend the neck on this one now.
Because look at the way Democrats immediately embraced it. There were large times in my Democratic precinct that said that's Democratic precinct. No, I think the response is the fact that that's willingly took that center stage. He willingly rushed it, as I would say, to try to get it done. So in other words,
where y'all from today? I see 170 people in the chat. Where y'all from? Sound off. Saw some people from Germany, Idaho, India, Iran yesterday. Where you at? Where are you coming from?
I think they didn't know Twitter. They were afraid of my I just don't accept the idea that, oh, this was a bumbling meritocracy. You just fumbled it.
Grant, I've got to say, everything about it now that we're here in the second company strikes me as the opposite. And I got a little first-hand experience of this with Donald Trump in April of this past year, accusing me of treason without any evidence, ordering a federal investigation into me, detonating my life, not based on any investigation, not based on the work of lawyers and frontline officers, but because he wanted it to be political. He wanted me to suffer. He wanted my family to be investigated. That is what a political prosecution looks like. We have zero evidence whatsoever
that the Biden administration from the White House down said, prosecute Donald Trump, put him in jail now. In fact, the delay was on account of the fact that Eric Barlow, Jack Smith, and others wanted to follow the law by the book. You criticize that. Well, I'm telling you, we're living through what the opposite looks like.
First off, Miles, I don't want you to be prosecuted. And I don't want you to be threatened to be prosecuted. But Merrick Garland said that parents who went to school board meetings to protest policies were terrorists. He said Catholics, conservative Catholics who said the Mass in Latin, might be collaborators with terrorists. It was literally a very political Department of Justice that went after political guilty. I just don't buy that Merrick Garland is this bumbling saint. I don't think.
We literally just had the president issue an order, Miranda number 7, where he said political dissent was domestic terrorism. But somehow this escapes that for you. Like,
No, I didn't. I'm not defending
We're talking about Merrick. It's not a question that's a yes or no. Is that also?
No, I don't think political dissent is political terrorism. It wasn't what Merrick Garland said.
I think we need to take a step back here because I can't believe it's literally 5 years after January 6th. The media has spilled more ink, spent more time on TV talking about this. The American people still elected Donald Trump for a second term. And I think that's part of because of the fallout of January 6th was the weaponization of Biden's DOJ. And that's, they did not find the pipe bomber, but they were able to arrest, for instance, a grandmother, Rebecca Lawrence, who was pushed into the Capitol as part of the, riot and prayed, left. There was another man, Ron Strand, who was held in solitary confinement for 4 months, eventually turned president. The Supreme Court actually had to come out and say, the Biden DOJ can't be weaponized. They can't charge people for literally being in a building. And I want to touch on two things. I want to touch on two things that are in fact new from, I want to touch on two things that are new. That the GOP has released this transcript, full transparency, so we get to see what's new in this. A couple of new things in this transcript. One, Jack Smith acknowledges that Cassidy Hutchinson was basically just repeating Thursday. She was the star witness for the entire January 6th committee. I think that undermines a lot of what they were trying to do.
Congressional committee, which is a completely different process from what Jack Smith was doing.
Yeah, that's an acknowledgement that the January 6th committee, but that's very, that's irrelevant.
January 6th committee does not offer the indictment.
It's something you said, it's irrelevant.
It's something you said.
And people don't acknowledge the spying that happened. I do, under our kid's thought.
Hold on a second. That was not spying. He talked, actually, he had a very interesting exchange about why they felt like they needed to actually get a court approval to get this information. And Ellie, I don't know if you saw this part, but this is important because he was basically saying, if we're going to go to court, we can't assume that they're just going to be like, here are the records that you see. We have to go to a court to get them. And that's the thing.
I think it's important to understand what this did not do with respect to those phone records of the 9 Republican members of Congress. He did not eavesdrop. This is not a wiretap. He's not listening in. He did not, after the fact, get any written transcript. He has never had any access to the content of those phone calls. What he got is what we would call pull record. You remember the old days?
Tubing up
where you say,
my blowhose to the glass, so I'm able to
call this number at this time.
puff into it.
That's it.
I'm a glass blower.
There's fair questions about whether that was bad judgment, whether that was overstep, whether he was politically motivated. It's not illegal though, and it's not wiretapping or anything close.
He didn't blow, but the judge, right?
It's in his final report. I mean, his final report came out publicly.
They went to the judge, right? They went to get the records, and they got to get the records. But let me play this because this is really important. This is why he says that President Trump was not just responsible, but he was also hearing from people in the Capitol, his allies, that they needed help and he didn't help them.
That violence started. The president refused to stop it. He endangered the life of his vice president. And he's getting calls, and not calls from Democrats, not calls from people he doesn't know, calls from people he trusts, calls from people he relies on, and still refuses to come to the aid of the people at the Capitol. That's very important evidence for criminal intent in our case.
At the end of the day, that's the bottom line.
Yes, sir.
It's not the claims that all of the January 6th, people who were convicted were victims. They're not really the victims of the story. Our democracy is the victim of
It is not at all victims. And I think it's really important to always say, and people feel this way all the time, that the Biden DOJ was recognized. No, it wasn't. And we have to say that every time that it gets said, because it is a cover for an actual representation, which is happening right now in front of our eyes, and people try to set up the Biden administration and say, because it was done then, it is okay to do this.
My bad, I'm just looking for,
done then. And
Didn't
everybody
Joe
absolutely
Biden, didn't Joe Biden in a statement acknowledge that the DOJ was recognized?
now.
But I'm going to have to agree with Lydia that we need to zoom out. But I'm going to disagree on why. This was not a protest that went awry. This was an effort for the first time in 250 years of our republic to prevent power from being transferred. That is so completely clear from the record. The President of the United States didn't want a peaceful transfer of power, and I will tell you, this will happen again. But this might have been addressed first, because last time, Trump's own team, the DOJ, DOD, the DHS weren't fully on board with this attempted coup. My former colleague, Chris Krebs, his top election official, a fellow Republican like me, said the election was free and fair and the president fired him. Now what's he doing? He's investigating Chris Krebs, and he's filled the Department of Homeland Security with insurrectionists and election deniers to secure the next.
But think about it. As we head into the new year, let me take this to everybody out there. There were prosecutorial excesses against Donald Trump. Albert Bragg, longtime friend of mine, absolutely unjustified case. Other things I think went overboard against Donald Trump. What the Trump DOJ is doing now is more and worse. There's no reason you, Miles Taylor, anyone in your position, Jack Smith, should be under any sort of criminal investigation. As a friend of mine said on air the other day, the thing about slippery slopes is they're slippery, and they get worse and worse. So let's hope that 2026 is the year we cut this crap out. But all of us collectively, let's
also not mix Albert Bragg up with the DOJ. You may say they're very different, and the by DOJ, there's no evidence that anybody has ever offered me actual evidence of this, that there was a weaponization of that DOJ in service of going after Donald Trump. You say that? But there is absolutely no evidence that the Biden DOJ was weaponized against Donald Trump. Donald Trump did horrible things, and he was being held accountable for it.
We gotta leave it there on next for us. President Trump draws the red line. He's telling Iran that the protests better not turn deadly or else, and the right is now in an uproar over that statement. Plus, remaking Washington, D.C. in his own image. Trump added things to his list to name and grant in the nation's capital will take that list.
Death Cab, the mushroom murders, now streaming on the CNN app.
When you host, your bathroom can feel like a revolving door. Keep things fresh with Febreze Bathroom. It's an outlet-free air freshener that fights odors for 45 days. So even after every flush, you know your bathroom smells amazing.
What's the secret to peak health? Going micro with Lou.
Micro habits, micro wins. Even microdose GLP-1s.
And starting at just $99? Heck yeah.
Now starting at just $99. Underground is here, and I needed it. Super easy. So easy to just whip together a quick, healthy meal. And HungryGroup.com for healthy groceries and simple recipes. Plus, get free veggies for money.
Okay, man.
We need to take around that short road. Take the little road. Short road relief will Russian big fingers.
Take the rock, short road thing with big stick. Taxes, chasing, politics, getting nowhere.
Helps you think faster, starting.
So locked and loaded and ready to go. Donald Trump is right saying if protesters are attacked, the United States will come to their rescue. Trump's 3 a.m. social media post calling for intervention in Iran was reposted by the White House this morning. But not everyone, including many of the supporters of Trump's, are behind this message.
Aren't people teasing right now that Samantha Power, that Hillary Clinton somehow got invited to the Mar-a-Lago New Year's Eve celebration because the president's coming out today saying, hey, we're locked and loaded. Isn't that straight from the Samantha Powers and Hillary Clinton?
Hey, appreciate y'all tapping in today. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments section. I'm about to have a sip of coffee and go check out if you guys have any questions. Appreciate y'all. What I'm doing right now, that tube on the left, the orange tube, I need to open up the hole so I can attach it to the tube on the right, that white tube. Dang, I see 300 people in the chat right now. Where y'all coming from? 357, where y'all coming from?
I hope 2009 the rhythm behind by Barack Obama, because he was trying to cut a nuclear deal. They fancy cutting a nuclear deal with the Iranians and the European Union. So I hope President Trump does. Iran's an enemy, not just an enemy of the United States, an enemy of all Western civilization. And I hope that we make sure the protesters succeed. I want to say, go back to Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is a dove who's always wrong with this stuff. He said that in the summer that taking out Iran's nuclear facilities would start World War III. He's always wrong. He doesn't speak for him.
I gotta say, this is the right message from the president for all the wrong reasons. Right message he doesn't. I think it is the obligation of the United States to stand up for human freedom wherever it's blossoming. It was the case in 2009, it's the case now. We should stand with people who want to have a free republic in Iran, not an Islamic republic, but the wrong reasons. The president of the United States is only doing this because he has a personal feeling for Iran. Look at other autocrats around the world who he doesn't stand up. President Xi in China, Putin in Russia. I wish Donald Trump would show the same zeal in defending Ukrainians and their rights to freedom that he is now for the Iranians. So that's the issue here. Is Donald Trump is making foreign policy personal, and he's in love with some autocrats, and he's opposed to others. That's not what we want.
I think Donald Trump will make sure that deal for Americans right here in this country. At the very same time he's saying he's doing for that for the protests in Iran, he is working personally to make sure that dissent in this country is declassified as domestic terrorism. That's the problem. Morality is completely dead in the Donald Trump age.
Let's be more specific. The president of the United States posts AI-generated videos of feces dropping on his own protesters in the same several months as he's defending Iran. Absolutely. That's real. That's not me. That's a horrific side-by-side of it.
Okay, I think we can. I think we understand.
Yes, I'm a glass blower. Yes, this is glass welding.
For protesting, potentially, because they have. I mean, women get acid put on their face and murdered. That's not happening to protesters here in the US. That's a really important distinction.
Republicans in some states have made it okay to run over protesters that they were not going to happen. Yes, we saw that happen when somebody ran over with a car and they died. That happened right here in America.
You really think it is just as dangerous to protest in the United States of America as it is here in Iran?
I think it's a principle of defending peaceful protesters in one country while you're protecting it in your own country.
But again, he's not protecting it. We're still protesting.
Can you take out the West and get the opportunity? So we support democratic protest.
It would be good if the president's policies were not schizophrenic. I'm asking your question, absolutely. Because the idea of American interest is played with rather than applied in a consistent way. If we were really talking about all the enemies of American interests, we would be looking at protests in a lot of countries. We'd be looking at administrations in a lot of countries that say we're going to be just as hostile to them as Iran, as Venezuela, or whatever. But that's not what we're doing. This president is golfing, and then when he wakes up and sits down and wants to come at 3 o'clock in the morning because he got up and he danced as fast as he goes, then he gets up and he says, oh, I'm going to attack people in Iran. This is crazy.
Should we help the dissidents in Iran or not? Should we help the dissidents in Iran or not?
I want to first have a consistent policy about protest, peaceful protest, and whether or not it is legitimate, whether it is here, in Iran, in any other country.
Because you take after the Iranian regime.
Do you agree with me? I don't know. Because I want to know, do you agree with me that we should have a consistent policy about whether or not peaceful protest is legitimate, whether or not it's there or here? Now, you answer that.
I'm a free speech zealot, and I think free speech should be protected.
In here, too, right?
Yes, in the United States. Yeah, do we need to make that clear?
And I think we should support in every country.
I think nobody what are we even talking about in terms of being locked and loaded? What does that even mean? And should we have a conversation about that, Lydia? I mean, I think that's kind of what Steve Bannon and Martin Taylor Greene are also talking about, is that back in the day, Trump used to say this about whether or not we were going to be running around policing the entire world.
We are not the policemen of the world. We more and more are not wanting to be the policemen of the world. And we're spending tremendous amounts of money for decades on policing the world, and that shouldn't be our priority. I want to help all of our allies, but we are losing billions and billions of dollars. We cannot be the policemen of the world.
It's easy to say, we bought the Iranian regime now, but are we going to bomb them out of power? Is that really the plan?
I mean, there's a frustration that Americans feel like they can't afford the American dream, and we're spending all this money on foreign aid and foreign wars. And certainly, most people in the aggravated are not willing to get entangled abroad. Yet, Trump is the commander-in-chief, and I think we've previously seen he's been able to sort of thread the needle between making sure that America is safe. Because let's be clear, Iran is a murderous regime. They're a huge funder of terrorism, and so I think he's trying to balance those interests. And we've seen when he bans like Iran, he's
He's not willing. He's basically threatening. If he is not willing to actually carry through on that threat, how is that not another red line that basically disintegrates into nothing because you're not able to follow the law?
Yeah, I mean, it's so completely fantastically critical on this question. But Lydia's right, he's the commander-in-chief, but Donald Trump's not a cabinet leader. And if he was a cabinet leader, and he had read the United States Constitution, he would know that even as commander-in-chief...
Appreciate y'all tapping in today. If you could chuck me a like, chuck a question, help me get this platform monetized. Appreciate y'all. 474 of y'all in here right now. Sound off. Where are y'all coming from today?
Of the last century, right? Every president, it feels like, and in some cases have been able to engage in a lot of military activities without going to Congress explicitly for the say-so. And Trump is threatening it in Venezuela, he's threatening it in Iran. Where's the end?
Yeah, the way it's used for it, we would have formal declarations of war by Congress that went into World War II. Instead, we had this authorization to use military force. In some instances, but we haven't had one since 2002. And every president since then, of both parties, are essentially backdating to that 2002 authorization of war to do almost whatever they want overseas, right? Now, there's different rules when you talk about domestic enforcement and overseas enforcement. But yes, Donald Trump clearly, with his threats on the Venezuela coast, but these threats is pushing that executive power and the power of commander-in-chief and chief diplomat to new levels. And I want to make this clear. There's not a courtroom-based, U.S. courtroom-based remedy or solution. People who don't like the Venezuelan boat strikes complain about it, but there's no, United Kentucky, nor Biden, all of our friends who makes a living suing Trump, has not sued Trump over this, because there's no judge in the United States federal district court system that has the power or is going to try to limit Donald Trump to do it. And if there's going to be a response to any of this, it has to come from a political source, it has to come from Congress, it has to come from public.
Right, and we have a Congress that is completely advocating about one of the least effective Congress in modern history, and Republicans like it that way because this president wants, he doesn't want to go to this. He wants to do things by dictate, and they're allowing it. And they're not.
Hundreds of drone strikes in the Obama administration. Hundreds of drone strikes. Democrats in Congress never tried to restrain power. I supported him. I'm glad he did it. I wish he'd followed through on the red line in Syria. I wish he'd been tougher than he was. That's just a function of the modern president. He has access to information. Things move faster. He's going to conduct foreign policy. It's pretty long.
So the neocons are back. We didn't expect this one, but they are back. Coming up next, Marble Onyx and hundreds of millions of dollars. We're going to take a look at President Trump's latest plan to transform Washington, D.C., and if they've gone too far.
Want to hear something great?
Factors on index of extract from the CNN. Ponvory lowers the number of white blood cells, lymphocytes, in your blood. Usually, this will return to normal within 1 to 2 weeks of stopping treatment. Ponvory can increase your risk of serious infections that can be life-threatening and may cause death. Ponvory can cause your heart rate to slow down, especially after you take your first dose. Do not take Ponvory if in the last 6 months you had a heart attack, unstable angina, stroke.
That's it.
You need Sinex saline for the next.
Just
Reserve.
dilate on Food Network.
Tonight, with the composer Stephen Schwartz joining a growing list of artists boycotting the Trump Kennedy Center, the Oscar and Grammy Award-winning composer who is scheduled to appear at DC's most iconic performance center this spring is coming soon on a statement, quote, "It is no longer apolitical, and appearing there has become an ideological statement. As long as that remains the case, I will not appear there." The president of the Kennedy Center, Rich Grinnell, posted on social media the Stephen Schwartz reports on totally bogus. So take that for what you will. What's not bogus is that a lot of people are going to the Kennedy Center right now. And this is just one piece of all the stuff that's going on with Trump in Washington. He is trying to put a powerful arch in. He's redoing the ballroom, making it larger than the White House itself. Talking in favor of the Kennedy Center. All of this, I don't know, I mean, why do you do this?
Well, that it's symbolic of the lawlessness. And there's a long history of this that I think we are seeing brought into sharp relief with Trump leading the Kennedy Center, White House, building the triumphal arch. And it was laid out best back in the 60s by a conservative writer that a lot of conservatives like me read growing up, and that was Ayn Rand. She wrote this essay called The Monument Builders, where she went through the history of despots throughout time who built monuments to themselves while they were in power, from the pyramids all the way to Soviet Russia, where the train system that Carlson lauded a few years ago was built by the generous hands of workers who were forced to do it. And now we have Donald Trump, who's spending taxpayer dollars to honor himself by building monuments to himself. There is no better or more on the nose of someone's authoritarian tendencies than their desire to build monuments to themselves. And so I think it's quite right and appropriate that entertainers would say, you know what, I'm not going to be part of that, especially if this building is now symbolic of a desire for this man to build a monument to himself.
Okay, Brad, I'm curious as a conservative as well. What's your take on that? I think it is a pretty.
I think the argument, people who are canceling their shows are rich level who can afford to lose money. They're hurting the IOPSI members, the electricians, the stage hands, people who work on a contract basis every time those shows come in, and they can't replace that work. They're hurting school kids who take field trips to go see the shows at the Kennedy Center. They're hurting people who want to be exposed to the arts in the area. Okay? It's a selfish, virtue signaling exercise, and it's really dangerous. We don't need to have the Kennedy Center politicized because the president appointed the members of the board. How would every president done that?
But the president named himself on the building. How is that not politicizing the Kennedy Center?
Jean-Pierre was on the board.
But did she put her name on the building? Did she put Joe Biden's name
It's
on the
an
building?
executive order that they will build
The bylaws to make sure that some members could not vote, but only presidential appointed members could vote, so that only President Trump members would be able to vote, and that's why you got a unanimous vote to put his name on the side of the building. That happened before this vote.
Charles, the Washington Post contacted all the previous official members. They said they've never really participated in the vote.
No, I'm not saying that.
That's different.
I'm not thinking that happened now. Are you saying to me that the final page is not a fact, and I said something that wasn't a fact?
I'm saying that you're shading.
So you're knowing, yeah.
No, you're shading. You're trying to convince me it's something important.
It's a problem. It's not a problem.
That in the past, ex officio members could vote. And
did not vote.
And did not, sure. They could, but they did not.
That's what it is.
Under the Trump regime, they changed the rules so that they could not vote. And then proceeded to put on the table a vote that they were named on the building that they wanted to be unanimous and was only because the ex officio members couldn't vote. So they took
So we don't even have to spend time worrying about ex officio members or the rest, because there is a law that was passed by Congress that makes it illegal to rename the Kennedy Center. I am amazed by the law all the time. I didn't realize it even existed. There is a specific law on the book, the federal law. Let me just read it. It was passed when the Kennedy Center was built. It says, no additional memorials or plaques in major memorials shall be designated or installed in the public areas of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. There's some minor exceptions. You can rename a street for a donor or that kind of thing. But the law says you can't rename this place. So I don't even know what the board was.
Here's the thing. You do want to get out of trouble. You do want the arguments to go through. You don't have to do it because this is the tough methodology, which is I do it first. And then I wait for the court, and I wait for the court to check me or not, but it's already done. I knocked down the east wing.
Charles, years after this is,
and I'll let you sue me, but it's only one
and the couple of commissions that are responsible for overseeing a change like the ballroom, he's stacking the deck with his people so that they can just
I mean, Charles is exactly right. Donald Trump's approach to litigation at the court, since he was in New York, before he was president, when he was in real estate, was act first, and then you got to go get a lawyer. You have to complain.
Andrew, you tell me
and look, it's effective. He wins a lot because it's better to be the defendant. The plaintiff's the one with the burden of proof. The plaintiff's the one that's got to go hire a lawyer, and he's doing it again here. But look,
if the building is knocked down, what are you going to do?
Emily's heard me say this before, but I mean, he brought that philosophy into the presidency. I mean, he said to us more than one occasion in the Oval Office, look, what I learned in business is you don't threaten to sue someone. They wave you off. You sue them, and then they settle. And said that to us. That's his strategy.
contracts, okay? So he signs a contract when he's president the first time to give the leases for DC's public golf courses, 50-year leases, to an entity. Then he comes in the second time and says, never mind, rips up the lease. Why? Who knows? Because he wants to redecorate or redesign these golf courses. Are there not more important things for him to be doing? He was marble shopping today for parts of the ballroom. I mean, he is the president of the United States. Inflation is a problem for Americans. You know, people are worried about their financial well-being. Are there not other more important things for him to be doing than these things?
You could say a lot of things about Donald Trump, saying he's unproductive or isn't working hard enough is not one of them. I mean, he's closed the southern border, he's got gas prices to their lowest
Come down to work until 11 a.m.
He's literally one of the laziest presidents in modern American history. I'm old enough to remember when he was castigating Barack Obama for playing golf, and he literally said, I will be working so hard for you that I will never go out and play golf. Those are his words, 2017. And now he has been playing golf every single weekend and sometimes during the week. What he is good at doing is disguising that in destruction. He sits behind that, he really works the desk. He really works the desk. He signs every piece of paper they put in front of him because that looks like something. He makes a lot of proclamations because that looks like something, and he tells other people to go do destructive things because that looks like he's doing something. But in fact, he is one of the laziest presidents we have had in modern American history.
It's like people are constantly outraged about all the things he's doing. I didn't realize that he was so lazy. But look, he is a builder. He spent his entire career building, doing real estate deals. I don't think most Americans really care that much. He passed an executive order saying he wants federal buildings to have classical architecture. I think people like that. He's not taking taxpayer money to build the East Wing. We needed a ballroom. I don't think that if you look at each of these issues, the American people really care.
Construction takes a lot less effort than building things.
Ahead for us, everyone wants to know, why is President Trump's hand